to get us kicked off on national debt.
All righty, national debt, something that everybody wants to talk about, right? Well, let's go back historically. We're going to go back really 6 presidencies to what the debt has looked like over time. This graph actually runs back before and during, I guess you would say, World War II, where you see there was a beginning spike in the national debt. And keep in mind that this graph is really talking about debt held by the public as a percent of the gross domestic product, or the GDP. So in this, you can see from World War II moving all the way to Carter, the debt continually moved down, and we had some reasonably high tax rates at that point as well. Carter came into effect. He continued the move with the debt going down. Now, that was the plus side on Carter. The negative side, if you wanted to get a mortgage, you were going to be paying double digits to get there. Can you imagine if we had the debt that we have today with the interest rates back then? That would probably have bankrupted our country. But that wasn't the case. Reagan came in, really applied Reaganomics to try to get the economy kicking at that point. And the administration did a very good job of getting the economy moving. But it did acquire more debt as it went along. And same happened in the Bush era, the first Bush senior. So it kept moving up. Now, when Clinton came into the presidency, at that point, he was really inheriting a pretty good economy, let the programs ride a bit. And you could see he also had the ability to move the debt down lower. So that worked out pretty well all the way to about 2000. You see, G.W. Bush took office, and as you recall, that's when we had the crisis, the financial crisis, where we had the dot-com bubble that burst with the stock market. We had a little bit of stimulus that went back into the economy, so you could see there's a little bit of bump up in his presidency. And towards the end of his presidency, then we ended up in that financial crisis with the bubble on the housing market and everything that went along with that. Market crashed again at that point, and Obama took over right at the end of that and really towards the beginning of the recovery. So when you look at it from once G.W. Bush got out of office, Obama took over, there was a sizable increase because there was a lot of stimulus going on at that point. You get to the end of Obama's period and Trump takes over. Well, it's interesting with this one because during his tenure for the first 3 years, the debt actually stabilized at that point. And a lot of that was due to the fact that there were so many people employed that it was bringing in a lot of taxes. So it was helping the situation at that point, although it did go up a little bit. Now, then COVID hit, and we started really pushing the stimulus packages. And towards the end, the last year, 2020, we racked up some serious debt to try to keep the economy moving and keep people solvent throughout that period. So now we're in a different era. The projections that they're looking at right now is that the debt is going to continue to go up. That's kind of worrisome for us, but one might ask, well, okay, the debt's going up. What are we going to do about it? Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. The first part, though, is where's the debt? Well, I want to thank Peter G. Peterson Foundation because they've got a national debt clock, and we kind of copied the numbers down where we are today. And we're reaching very close to $28 trillion worth of debt, which is about $84,000 per individual in America. Pretty big numbers. So we're talking about men, women, children type thing. So it's a lot of money that we owe per person if we want to get out of debt. And the only way to take care of that is either growing the economy or a combination of growing the economy and taxing, kind of Reaganomics 101. So let's move forward. What's causing the debt? Well, when you think about the changing demographics, the projected senior population, and that's 65 years and older, is growing substantially. You know, from 2010 to 2020, it jumped 16 million. And you move forward another 10 years, it goes from 56 million to 73. That's a big jump, and it doesn't look like it's stopping either. So we do have an aging population, and with the aging population comes expenses. One of the biggest expenses is going to be the rising healthcare cost. If you think about it, in many ways, the healthcare is the most important issue for the national's fiscal and economic future. It really does represent about 1/5 of the entire economy. So it's a big number. So if you look forward and you think about the costs, this graph here shows the healthcare cost around the world and where we are. So you look at the United States, our healthcare system's the most expensive in the world. Now, that being said, it is also the best in the world. So when you look at it, if you want a Cadillac, you got to pay the price for the Cadillac. If you want a Chevy Chevette, you pay the price for a Chevy Chevette. But somehow this cost does need to get under control. Unfortunately, there's really no consensus on how to do it at this point. So what they're projecting is that the healthcare costs are just going to continue to move up. Now, you think about the debt and revenues, where we are today. The fact is we've got inadequate revenues coming in to cover the growing debt. If you think about it, you've got revenues and you've got expenses. If the expenses are over the revenues, what's going to happen? Your debt's going to go bigger, right? So it's important that we get some kind of balance going on here. So why is the national debt so high? Well, the reality is when you look at the revenues from 2019 and the total spending, we got about $1 trillion deficit there. That's a big number, and that's one of the reasons the debt continues to go up. So we've got to control the revenues as well as the spending. You know, it's no different than a household at home. If you're making $100,000 a year, but you're spending 110, well, at some point you're going to reach a tipping point, and there's going to be a problem. You're going to have to cut back big time, and that's kind of where we are right now with the U.S. spending. Now, we talked about Medicare being really the second fastest growing, but the area that is the biggest concern right now is the interest on the debt when you're looking forward. Because if you think about it, actually, if you go back about 5 years, this is an interesting fact. I was thinking about this earlier. If you go back about 5 years, the interest on the debt was actually about $500 billion. So it was actually higher from a dollar standpoint. Now you might say, well, if the debt's gone up, why is the interest going down? Well, what happened to interest rates? 5 years ago, interest rates were a lot higher than they are today. So the cost to carry that debt load is less, but it's continually growing. So again, if you could imagine, if the interest rates go up, if they double, what happens to the debt load? It doubles also, right? But what they're projecting based on the debt not curving is that the interest on the debt is really projected to actually more than double. So it is the fastest rising cost in our spending for the United States at this point. So the debt does have to get paid down. The interesting thing when you're talking about all this money that's being spent, and we didn't even talk about the fact that we just had another $1.9 trillion spending with the COVID relief, and how is that going to play into this whole thing?
That's still coming. Yeah, it's interesting. Those are mind-boggling numbers to me.
Yes.
I mean, when you're talking 27 trillion, and then you associate it with the annual budget revenue chart that you just showed of only 4.45 billion, that's annually.
Yeah.
How many years of debt does it take to accumulate that 27 trillion?
Well, we know how fast we can accumulate it, and that's an easy one, right? It's easy to borrow money. It's paying down the debt that's a slow and painful thing, and that's really what you're saying, right?
The only positive of this is that the government turns out to be a bigger spender than me. So I don't feel like that when I have to buy something. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Anyways,